All right, please excuse me. I am learning this new application, so the beginning it's not going to be as clear cut as normal, but hopefully I will be able to get through this. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is the YHUHderek channel. I am Ayana, your facilitator today, and I wanted to talk about what is morning and what is evening, establishing the parameters of day. I wanted to start out, I know it's been several months since I put out a video. I wanted to start out with this because there's so many, this can go in so many directions. And I feel that it's a basic building block to understanding scripture. Many years I spent on Yahweh's name, the alphabet, Yahusha's name, and it's time to get back. It's time to get to more content of scriptures. So I've been working on several things in the background. One of them is understanding Genesis 1, which is a series that I started, and it will be completed in time. But I wanted to get, because I felt, especially in the edition verses 3 through 5, I felt like people didn't grasp what day is. And understanding what a day is according to scripture, according to Yahuwah, it is the building block to understanding not only Genesis chapter 1, but other verses throughout scripture. And its implications can be carried into understanding the Enoch calendar, understanding what a week is, what a year is, understanding feasts and when they're supposed to take place. Right? So let's get started. What is morning? What is evening? Establishing the parameters of the day. But first, I would like to thank all of you, the people whose names are on this screen, and everyone. You know, I've been very, very ill. I've been ill with a bleeding disorder. I've been ill with seizures. I've had to overcome some things, and I'm still going through those things. So I'm not completely healed. The doctors are not really sure what's happening, but I want to thank all these people and everyone who prayed to Yahuwah for my well-being. Thank you. Thank you. I talked to a few of you over these past months. The last video I made was in April. And I just want to thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for thinking of me and my family. Thank you for your continual prayers on my behalf. I am deeply touched. I'm deeply grateful for my brothers and sisters out there. So thank you so much. Now let's get to the purpose of this video. Number one, we're going to establish when morning starts. We're going to establish when evening begins. We're going to correctly understand the duration of a day, what Yahuwah calls a day, right? And then lastly, we're going to dispel false teachings of evening and day. So let's get started. All right, so we're going to start right here at Matthew Matthew 16, verses 1 through 3. The Pharisees also with the Sadducees came and tempting desired him that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said to them, when it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and cloudy. O you hypocrites! You can discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. Now, I came across this verse. I was actually looking at some of the confrontations that the Sadducees and Pharisees had with Yahusha, and this is Yahusha speaking, by the way. And this popped out to me. Yahuwah, he has a way of showing me something. And this popped out to me because it describes the parameters of day. And we've already talked about the parameters of day in understanding Genesis verses 3 through 5. But this is a second confirmation. So, we always dig into the etymology. So let's get into it. Sorry. All right. So, I have different words and different colors. We'll start with evening. Right? So evening, since this is in Matith Yahu, you have to look at the Greek words, which is, I used Thayer's lexicon, and Thayer's is very good for connecting it to the original Yahudyth or Hebrew word. So for the word evening, we have opsios. G3798, and it means to be late or evening. Now, this Greek word correlates to the Yahudyth word Arab, and there's the Strong's numbers there, and it means to mix or evening, right? So the second word, and it's in these verses twice, is the word red. In Greek, that's parazo. You have the Strong's numbers there, and it means having the color of fire or red. It correlates to the Yahudyth word Adam, and that means to be red. So, the last word in green, morning, is the Greek word proi, with the Strong's number, and it means morning or before. It correlates to the Yahudyth word bakwar, or some people say boker with a vowel pointing, but bakwar, and that means morning, daybreak, or dawn. So the interesting thing about these verses, which I have underlined here, is that Yahusha is agreeing that these are correct understandings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Right? These are correct. That morning, the sky is red. Evening, the sky is red. So he's not disagreeing, he's agreeing. So there we have the parameters of what day is. In the morning, the sky is red, and in the evening, the sky is red. So in the morning, looks like this. The sun is rising, the sky is red, and the day is starting, right? This is what evening looks like. The sun is setting, and the red color goes across the clouds. You'll note that the sun is still in the sky. That's the yellow part in the picture there, right here. The sun is still there. It's setting, but it causes a red color to go across the sky. So in the morning, the sky is red, and in the evening, the sky is red. So I wanted to go back over the verse. We talked about understanding Genesis chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. And I wanted to go over verses 4 and 5. And Eluah, which is Yahuwah, saw light, that it was good. And Eluah divided the light from darkness. And Eluah called light day, and darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So, when we talk about day, and you look up the word day in this verse, it's the Yahudyth word Yaum. And there's the Strong's number, and it just means the day. This is from Gesenius's lexicon. The primary signification appears to me to be that the heat of the day. The root word appears to be from yakam, and there's the Strong's number, meaning to be hot. So the heat day is when it's light outside, right? Because Yahuwah talks about, he called the light day. It's light outside and there's heat. Now, looking up the term heat of the day in scripture gave me all these verses. Now, these usually mean noontime, when the sun is highest in the sky, right? But clearly, daytime means to be light and to be hot outside, right? That is a day. Now, this is actually a screenshot from that same video, Understanding Genesis. And we talked about the duration of a day, how scripture called and day, evening, in the evening and the morning was the first day, which is what we're talking about here. And existing evening and existing morning, first day, or day first, right? And we talked about how in this square here, this is the standard translation for this verse. And then this box here was the extended and expounded translation with every word interpreted of this verse. And I stated that the problem with the last line, verse 5, being translated is that they excluded one word that was placed in this verse twice, and that's the word Yah. And I have the both words, which is H1961, which is the word Haya, which means to exist, and also the shortened version, which is Yah, which is Yahuwah's the root word to Yahuwah's name. Now, the problem with this is that these words, this word Yah and this word Yah, it does not get translated. It's excluded from translation. And I showed that by not having a white word. The white words were the translation from scripture books. Excuse me. And it's not translated because there's not a word in white above this word. I have each word that is translated above its Yahudiath word. But Yah, which is in this verse twice, is not translated. It's not put, it does not say existing evening. It just says evening. And this was done on purpose. Because if I say an evening and morning were day, then you think that evening to daylight means a day, right? But existing evening, if this is the first day of all creation, which it is in scripture, right? The first day of all creation, there is only one evening and one morning, and it's that morning of that day and that evening of that day. So that means that and we know that evening to day, that doesn't make a day, that doesn't make daytime. Okay, so it's obviously morning to evening. That morning to that evening was the first day, and that's how I translated it here. And Yahuwah called light day and called darkness night, and that existing evening and that existing morning was the first day. Stating existing means it pertains to that day. The day doesn't leak into overnight until the next morning, as we are taught by certain peoples and certain groups. It means that day on that day. And I just wanted to go over that. Please feel free to go back. This is the name of the video that's already on the channel. Go over that again. And that coupled with Matthew 16, 1 through 3, those are two witnesses for the same thing, right? So, again, going back, a day is when it's light outside, right? And also heat. That day, that existing evening, and that existing morning is important, even though it's not translated, it is there, so that you know that it would pertain to that particular day. From morning to evening is a day. All right. So, Yahuwah separated day from darkness, and a day constitutes morning and evening. Night is not included. And I say that because there are certain groups, certain peoples who tell you that day starts in the evening, which is absurd. But again, Genesis, Bereshith 1, 4 through 5, and Matthew 16, 1 through 3, they agree with each other. All right. So this is the second screenshot that I took from the Understanding Genesis video, and I went painstakingly through how scripture divides night and day, because that's important. At the top here, I have a quote from Yahusha in Yahuchanan, John 11:9. And Yahusha answered, are there not 12 hours in a day? So there, Yahusha confirms that, there's approximately 12 hours in a day. Now, obviously, that varies what time of year and what season you're in, but he's saying that, right? If any man walk in the day, he stumbles not, because he sees the light of this world, and it continues on. But the main part is, are there not 12 hours in a day? So this is a third witness that night is not included in day. I went on ahead, and in scripture, night was referred to as watches, and you can look up all these verses that contains first, second, third, and fourth watches, and some other supplementary verses. And then I went through how day was counted in hours, and I have the verses and the approximation of those days. Again, we know that daylight and night varies depending on the seasons and the time of year, but the approximation is 12 hours each. 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. And then lastly, I went through where in scripture that days and nights are counted together, right? So please take a look at all of these verses. Go take a look at that video again. And we now have 3 verses that confirm how long day is, when day starts, when day ends, and how night is separate. So those are 4 different points there. So to make the delineation between what Yahuwah says and what man says. Now we'll start with men. Men in certain groups and certain beliefs, they tell you that the day starts in the evening. Now, no one on earth lives like this, but they tell you that, right? They tell you it starts in evening, and it goes a whole 24-hour cycle through night, through morning, through the daytime, back to evening. And they tell you that a day is a 24-hour cycle, right? And that it starts in evening. So day actually starts at night, which is absurd, right? But Yahuwah, according to his scripture and according to what he says, the day starts in the morning, it grows throughout the duration of the day, and the day ends at evening. And he tells you that day is a approximate 12-hour cycle, right? Now, there are places on the earth where days are typically a 12-hour cycle, right? There's places on earth closer to the equator where days are that long, and they're pretty consistent, right? because those seasons, there's a rainy season and then there's a dry season. It pretty much, there is no autumn and there's no springtime. It's pretty consistent, right? But because we're talking scripture, people tend to give leave of their own knowledge, of their own common sense. Just because someone who is versed in scripture, someone who studied scriptures, someone who's leader of a religious community or a religious sect, they tell you something crazy. And because we hand over our own autonomy, our own common sense, and our own knowledge to them because they're supposed to be of the authority. Using your own common sense and how you live your life, and pretty much how everyone lives their lives on earth. The day starts in the morning. You get up in the morning to go to work, and you work all day, and you come home in the evening. And nighttime is for rest. But because these leaders and these people, they tell you that day starts in the evening, and you acquiesce to that. You acquiesce to, okay, well, I mean, it is put in that order in scripture. Yes, it's put in that order in scripture because a word was not translated. Okay? And it was left out on purpose to mislead and to trick. The day does not start in the evening. You come home from work in the evening. And from evening throughout the night until the next morning, you sleep. You get ready for the next day. You do everything you have to do. You go to bed and you sleep all night long until the morning again. So I want people to stop handing over what's common sense and what's common knowledge and what you practice in your life and what everyone throughout the earth practice. Day starts in the morning. Okay? So this is just a nice visual to show you the duration of a day, right? Morning, red sky, according to scripture, Matthew 16, 1 through 3. And in the evening, throughout the day, right? The sun is at its apex at noontime. That's the heat of the day, according to scripture. And then it keeps going until you get to evening, which is when the sun is setting, not the sundown, right? So now that we have that, now that we know that morning starts, the sky is red because the sun is rising, and we know that evening begins when the sun starts setting and the sky is red and the sun is going down. And in between those is daylight. Now that we know that, now that we've established that through scripture, through, three different witnesses, right? We have to start talking about what's the implications of this knowledge. So the first implication is that evening is not the same as dusk and twilight. Why am I adding dusk and twilight? Because the same people who are telling you that day starts in the evening and it's a 24-hour period are the same people who tell you that evening is dusk and twilight. And I want to establish here that evening and dusk and twilight are not the same thing. But first, I have dusk/twilight because depending on the scripture verse or translation that you use, it may say dusk or it may say twilight. So I have dusk/twilight. All right. So here are the verses that talk about twilight, talk about the dark, and talk about the night. We have Job 3:9. Let the stars of the twilight be dark. Let it look for light, but have none, nor let it see the dawning of the day. Job 24:15. The eye also of the adulterer waits for twilight, saying, no eye shall see me, and disguises his face. Proverbs 7:9. In the twilight of evening day, in the black and dark night. Jeremiah 13:16. Give glory to Yahuwah, your Eluah. before he calls darkness, and before your feet stumble in the dark mountains. And while you look for light, until he turn it into shadow of death and make it gross darkness. And lastly, Isaiah 5:11. Woe to them that rise up early in the morning, that they may follow strong drink, that continue until night, until wine inflame them. In all these verses, whether it's twilight, dark, or night, it's associated with being dark and not being able to see. So when those same people who tell you that the day starts in the evening and that one day constitutes evening to evening, the same people are telling you that evening is dusk and twilight, they're wrong. According to scripture, twilight is dark. And according to scripture, evening is when the sky is red and the sun is setting. Okay? Now, here are those words for those verses that we just looked at. The primary word of scripture for twilight or dusk is nashap. Here are the Strong's words. It means to blow. Twilight, when a colder wind blows. All right, you can take a look at those numbers yourself and read the definitions of them, but that's what it means. The second word is elata. Right? Here's the Strong words. It means thick darkness, to cover over with thick darkness. By the way, this is what twilight looks like. Okay. Now, the third word is apala. And here's the Strong's numbers. It means thick and dense darkness, to obscure. Again, not being able to see. Now, I looked up twilight, and according to worldatlas.com, twilight/dusk occurs when the sun is below the horizon, and they had a range of degrees, and it was anywhere from 6 degrees to 18 degrees. But this is the picture that they use to describe what twilight looks like. Now, twilight, yes, you can see the last vestiges of the sunlight, but primarily you see a dark sky, you can see the stars, and this is what certain groups are telling you is evening. This is not evening, this is twilight, this is dark. It's dark. Okay? Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a child, living in the city, we had to come into the house when the street lights came on. And the city street lights came on at evening. Right? It was still light outside, but it was evening. They did not come on when it was dark. They came on when there was still light outside. And we had to be in the house before dark. Right? All right, so here is an illustration of what YHUH and scripture talks about. Evening is when the sun is in the sky. It looks like this. Twilight or dusk is when the sun is below the sky. This is definitely dark. This is not evening at all. And there's a reason why there was a pivot from evening to twilight, and I'll get to that. And then lastly, obviously, when it's all the way dark, there is no sun, the moon is up in the sky, it's dark, ain't no sun at all. So I want you to look at the differences, go back over the verses, what is evening and what is twilight, and really get that into your head, what is being said. And please consider that this ain't evening. I don't care who say that. This is not evening. All right, so the second implication of establishing what true day is and the duration of day and what evening is and the difference between evening and twilight is that evening, red sky, has nothing to do with the moon. We know that evening does not mean twilight, and we can address whether the moon and its phases are necessary. So the moon, whether you follow a new moon or you follow a full moon, because there is a debate about that, especially with the lunar calendar, right? Some people say new moon, some people say full moon, regardless of the phase. It cannot be seen in an evening sky when the sun is setting. You can't see that. You can't see the moon in the evening sky. It can only be seen during twilight or anytime afterward, right? Point number 2, there are no instructions from Yahuwah in scripture that indicate any need to verify the phase of the moon for any feast, sacrifice, or ceremony. None. It doesn't come into play. And we'll get into that, but I'm telling you, none. This is the image of what they call the new moon. There's some debate on whether this image is correct. New moon is actually the dark moon, which you wouldn't even see the sliver of light right here. It would be fully this. All right. And the new moon, with it being a completely dark moon, there is a lot of implications that follows many pagan and witchcraft type religions. But I'll get to that in another video. So lastly, if preparations for feasts were done during twilight, they wouldn't be completed in time. And we're going to look at an example. We're going to look at Pesach, otherwise known as Passover. We're going to look at that right now. So here, this is talking about the preparations for Pesach. I didn't put the whole amount in there. We're just going to talk about the verses in Exodus 12, Shemuth 12, verses 6 through 8. And we have evening on one side and we got twilight or dusk on that side. And while I talk to you about what happens during the preparation for Pesach, I want you to ask yourself a question. Can it be done in evening or could it be done during twilight or dusk? All right. And you shall keep it until the 14th day. We're talking about the lamb of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Yasharel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper doorposts of the houses where they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. So what I want you to think about, right? Because my family were farmers, right? Like 6th generation farmers. So I know a lot of what goes into killing a lamb or a sheep, right? So first you have to kill it, right? And Yasharel does all of that together. You have to drain the blood. I want you to think about the amount of time it takes. You have to drain the blood. You have to defer it or take off its skin. You have to get rid of certain parts inside. Like you have to get rid of the bladder. You have to get rid of I don't know what you call the excrement, the place where the excrement is at in a lamb, but you have to remove that. You can't cook that with that in there, right? You have to prepare. You have to get rid of all the blood except for the little bit that you're going to put on the door and the side posts, right? Unleavened bread, because you have to eat it with unleavened bread. Unleavened bread has to be cooked. Herbs have to be gathered if they're not already gathered. So how long do you think that's going to take? Can you do it during twilight? It'll be pitch black dark out there when you're taking your time to do all these steps, right? You have to bring it, you have to roast it. I missed that part. After you do all that preparation, you got to roast the lamb. Roast the lamb takes hours on the outside spit. If you barbecue like that, you know what I'm talking about. If you do any type of rotisserie, anything, you know exactly how long it takes. You gonna do all that and start at twilight after whomever goes, checks outside and walks up on the hill and looks at the moon and verifies that this is the start of the feast? Or do you do that in the evening? You start in the evening where you can still see. And this is what I want you to think about when you should always be thinking about what makes sense when someone tells you about scripture, myself included. You need to think about what makes sense. You gonna do all that here? You better go get some torches and some mosquito repellent, citronella. You gonna do all that here? Or you gonna start here where you can still see? Think about that. So, in summary, we have established that day is when there's light and heat. You get that from Genesis 1 verses 4 through 5. That the heat, we also established the heat of the day, which you can look up those verses. It usually refers to noon, but daytime encapsulates morning, red sky throughout the day until evening, red sky, right? That's the second point here. The duration of the day is from morning through evening. We talked about the two sets of verses, and I'm going to go ahead and add that John verse where Yahusha says, aren't there 12 hours in a day? So we actually have 3 verses that verifies that, right? And you can review video Understanding Genesis chapter 1 verses 3 through 5. Day is counted separate from night, and we talked about that in that second screenshot from the same video. Please take a look at that in depth because there were a lot of verses that I provided as proof, right? Also, we established that evening and twilight / dusk are not the same thing in scripture, right? Evening is when the sun is setting, the sky is red, it's going down. Twilight is when the sun is below the horizon and the stars are out and it's dark. All right. Twilight and dusk are considered dark. Here are all the verses that we went through. We also established that the moon cannot be seen during evening because the sun is still setting. The whole sky is full of red and different colors as the sun set, right? You can't see the moon and all that. It can only be seen during twilight / dusk when the sun is down. Okay. Lastly, there are no instructions from Yahuwah in scripture that indicate any need to verify the moon or its phases for any feast, sacrifice, or ceremony. So now comes the time, what's truth and what's a lie? The lie that's being told to us is that the day starts in the evening and one whole day is 24 hours from evening until the next evening. That is a straight up lie. Okay? We also are being told that night is included in that 24-hour day period. That was made up by men. That is not what Yahweh says. That is not what Yahweh ever said in scripture. And you can't find when night is including in daytime. Another lie that we're told is that evening is during twilight and dusk, which we have established through scripture that twilight and dusk is dark. And we also established that through scientific means, worldatlas.com, that the sun is below the horizon when twilight and dusk happens, right? And we were tricked into believing evening comes first in a day by excluding the word for existing, which is Yah. And here are all the verses that Yah is excluded from in that first chapter of Genesis. So for each day, first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, these are all the verses that they exclude the word Yah. So it's been continued. They do not translate it. They do not put the translation of existing, the word Yah, in the translation and it's all a lie. So now that we know the lies that we're being told, we need to go on to the truth, what Yahuwah says. Yahuwah says day is when light and heat are outside. From morning through to the evening, approximately 12 hours. That is daytime, right? Yahuwah separated day from night. That's in that verse 4. Genesis 1, verse 4. And evening is when the sun is setting in the sky. Okay? Now those people, and I know you're probably like, who are those people? The people who tells you all of this stuff. You know, whether it's religious leaders of a certain sect of religion, whether it's theologian people who follow along, people, denominations who have set doctrines, or people who follow lunar calendar. All this is a lie. So by pivoting evening towards twilight, the moon could then be used to determine feast. And I want you to understand, I don't know who initially did it, but it's been happening for a long time. They keep telling you that evening is twilight. And the reason why they moved it, because like I said, you can't see the moon in a sun setting sky. The sun hasn't gone down yet. All right? But you can during twilight when it's dark and you can't see. Spiritually, when it's dark and you can't see, you have to depend on certain men to go outside and declare at the sight of a moon that this is when a feast starts. Instead of listening to Yahuwah, who tells you precisely when a feast is supposed to happen, by the month and by the day. He tells you in the first month on the 14th day, you sacrifice the Pesach lamb. On the 15th day of the first month through the 21st day, you are to eat unleavened bread, and there should be no leaven found among you. Yahuwah tells you precisely. It's literally a number count. You don't have to look outside and reveal the moon, right? And revere the moon to go see when the feast starts. Yahuwah tells you without you having to go outside. But you got to have a correct calendar. You got to know what a day is, right? Because a day is the basic building block of a calendar. Right? We count our calendars by days. We don't count our calendars by nights. And when I say by days, I mean the 12-hour day that Yahuwah has been mentioning all throughout Scripture. I'm not talking about this 24-hour thing. That's man-made. Pivoting evening towards twilight, an interpretation of the moon, is a part of idolatrous religions. Old ones. Not any of the ones here. Old ones. Old ones, thousands of years old. We talking Baal and Ashtoreth and all them. Old. Right? Another lie. That the phase of the moon has to be consulted so a feast can be declared. Yahweh don't say that. As a matter of fact, he tells you don't revere the moon. Don't worship it. Don't follow it like that. The sun, the moon, or the stars, or anything on the earth, or anything in the water below the earth. He tells us that. And here are the verses where he talks about the sun and the moon and the stars. Don't do it. It's bad. Don't do it. He don't like it. Look at these verses. And you just have to decide what you're going to do. Are you going to continue to follow the dictates of man? Are you going to go and search? You have to understand what a day is. If you don't understand what a day is, you don't understand creation week. You don't understand a month. And lastly, you don't understand a whole year. If you're going by 24 hours, you're going to be messed up. If you follow the moon, it says, both in Enoch and in Jubilee, if you follow the moon, you off by 10 days. And I'll get into that maybe in another video, but you gotta stop. All right. So this is the conclusion of this video. I'm a little off, but hopefully, I got my message across. And if anybody would like to contact me, you can do it through email, YHUHderek@mail.com. And again, thank you for looking out for me. Thank you for praying for me and my family. I continue to ask for prayers, and I thank you. And may Yahuwah Baruch, which is the true word for blessing, may Yahuwah Baruch you and your family, and he takes care of all your needs and give you some of your wants as well. Shalom.